Welcome to Movie Menu Interviews. I'm your host, Anthony Muñoz, where we interview up-and-coming filmmakers to discuss their films from idea to completion. On today's episode, we'll be interviewing filmmakers Graham Kolbeins and Dorian Wood. I would like to welcome Graham and Dorian to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you,
We're
Dan and Mike.
excited. Just to give a background on why we do the show is just to discuss the process for future filmmakers out there, to talk about what worked and what you would change for their next project, plus any advice you give to our listeners. Graham, Dorian, can you tell us a bit about yourselves? Where did you guys grow up? And also your preferred pronouns?
Okay, my name is Graham Kolbeins, and my pronouns are he or they. And I grew up in a few different places. I was born in Vancouver, Canada. Grew up outside of Philadelphia until I was 12. And then I moved to Davis, a town in Northern California. That's where I went to high school. And I've been living in LA most of my adult life.
Nice. Dorian?
I'm Dorian Wood. My pronouns are they, them, their, and I was born in LA in Echo Park, but I've lived in Costa Rica, Florida, and mostly in LA and Sylmar. I guess Sylmar isn't LA, so I've lived two different places in Southern California. But I've been in California most of my life.
Great. Since you both live in LA, was filmmaking something you both wanted to get into? Dorian, I know you're a musician as well. How did you get into filmmaking?
I did actually move down to Los Angeles to go to film school originally. Right after high school, I went to CalArts film and video program for 1 year, and then I dropped out because it's pretty expensive.
CalArts is very pricey.
Yeah, it's a great school if you can afford it. And I'm kind of glad I did drop out just because the student loans from that 1 year took about 10 years to pay off. But yeah, it was a great place to sort of start getting interested in the creative process of filmmaking more. And then after that, I took this kind of circuitous route towards where I am today. I didn't start making films immediately. I did a whole bunch of different things. So for a few years, I was an extra in a lot of like TV and film things.
Nice.
And then
Anything you could talk about?
You can see me for half a second in Norbit. I was on a bunch of like Disney Channel shows because I was 18, but I looked young enough to play a high school student. And that was an interesting way just to see how sets operated without actually having to do anything other than walk across a set. And then after that...
And get paid for it.
Yeah, I got to take home a paycheck. So I do recommend that sometimes when people are trying to figure out, like, how can I get involved in the industry? I'm like, you can be a production assistant and carry around C-stands all day. Or if you can find it, you could work as an extra and basically do nothing but still get to observe how the set works. So,
nice.
Yeah, so after I worked as an extra, I did some writing for magazines and ran an art gallery for a couple years. And that was around the time that I met Dorian, actually, because we got to work together in this art gallery that was hosted by the Pacific Design Center. And so we were occupying a space in that building rent-free. And we had all this strange performance art happening in there that we thought was great. But apparently the building had issues with themes of sexuality. And yes, so that was our first collaboration in a way.
I don't know who's blushing more, you or me.
But we can get into that more later if we feel like it. But basically, I did that, and then I started trying to make short documentaries. And I did this series of documentaries called Rad Queers that profiled various LGBT artists and community groups in Los Angeles and Chicago. And eventually I started working on this feature film, Queer Japan, that is going to play at Outfest this year. And
congratulations.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be putting it out into the world after working on it for 4 years. And
4 years.
Yeah. And during the editing process of that, Dorian came to me and they had this great idea for a short film centered around one of their songs, and that's how our film Paisa came to be. But we'll get into more of that, and I'll let Dorian introduce themselves 10 minutes into the show.
Oh, that's perfect.
No, that was wonderful. Well, it just really goes to show, like, you've done so much, and it's not just the fact that you have done, like, quantity-wise, but like what you were doing that really fascinated me from the very beginning. There was like this evolving wokeness before being woke was a thing that I really admired in Graham, and not just, for starting out at a relatively early age, but you were just so prolific with just all this really fascinating, solid body of work that just kept just growing and growing. And I think at the time, I was going through my journey as well, and I found a creative kindred spirit. I know that I like to be busy, and it's not just, for monetary reasons, but it's survival on many levels. I get very depressed if I'm not doing anything. So it is a way to just stay busy, but also I feel very, very fortunate to be consistently inspired by one thing or another, and how that inspiration comes out is, it's always different. And there's, I've mostly worked in music and performance, but there are certain visions that come out in other mediums. And when I would have an idea for something visual that, needed to be recorded in some sort of way, but even with performance, these are like things that brought Graham and I together. And I was very excited. Like, I think you invited me to be a part of, was it Mastodon Mesa?
Yeah. Good memory.
Yeah. We don't forget. No, no, but that was, it was very exciting because at the time I was coming into my own as a performance artist, and I had been doing music. I too went to film school very briefly, and I too dropped out. And it was,
there was that in common.
Yeah. I went to LA.
Learning about each other.
Yes. I'm an Aries.
Libra, Scorpio cusp.
I went to LACC, and I dropped out partially for monetary reasons, but I think also I just wasn't feeling fulfilled. I was quickly learning how competitive it was, even on a community college level, to get your vision out there. And I just wanted to make it happen and didn't want to have to compete with others to realize it. So I quit film for a while, and I just focused on music, and I started recording demos of my own music on a boombox. And then I progressed to a karaoke machine, and then to a computer, and I assembled a band. I started performing live, and then so that started happening. But there was always, this visual outlet that I felt I neglected for a while. So as I started becoming more realized as a musician, that's when I started just bringing back that aspect of the
visual art.
Yeah, but for as long as I can remember, what I really wanted to do was direct. And the main reason why I came back from LA, I was living in Florida for a while, and before that Costa Rica. But I came back to be a filmmaker, specifically a filmmaker. And
now you have your film in Outfest, which is amazing.
Congratulations. Thank you. I'm so excited. I'm so thrilled that we got to create this together. It was really just one of the most positive experiences creating anything for me. Like, it's, to work with, with the people that we got to work with Graham, and I knew from the very beginning that I wanted to work with Graham. And as years went by, we collaborated on several things in the past, and I don't recall if we had really done something that was as co-directors specifically.
Yeah, most of our collaborations kind of came about in less direct ways than this one.
Right.
So whether it was recording a live performance or filming you recording a track, we were kind of doing more of documentation, or I was more in a cinematographer role. And on this project, we basically like sat down and discussed it together and sort of strategized on how to bring Dorian's vision to life on the screen, which was a new process for us.
And like really just so honored that, you know, that Graham came on board, because like I know you were really busy with Queer Japan, and this has been your passion for, you know, for years. And
it was nice to have something like refreshing and different. Yeah, because I was editing for almost 3 years on Queer Japan, and it took over my mind in a way, which you kind of have to do when you're making a feature-length documentary that has so many pieces to it. But it was nice to exercise a different creative muscle with Dorian.
Now, let's go ahead and talk about the films. Talk about the concept for Queer Japan.
Yeah, so Queer Japan is basically a kaleidoscopic portrait of LGBTQ artists and activists in Japan today. I've been collaborating with a few different gay manga artists since 2012 on various projects. These include Gengaro Tagame and Jiraiya, who are two of the sort of biggest gay manga artists in Japan, and neither of them had had their work published in English before. So I got together with my friend Anne Ishii in 2012, and we started traveling to Japan over several trips and interviewing these artists and putting together book projects with their work to get them published in English. And then that evolved into this brand that we did called Massive Goods, where we made t-shirts with like BDSM gay artwork by Gengaro Tagame on it. And that kind of took off in different directions. And we did these tours where we brought some of the artists to North America for various lectures in universities and signings at Comic-Cons. And throughout this whole process, I was just getting more and more fascinated with queer culture in Japan as a whole and how many different facets it had beyond this niche of gay manga that I was like so obsessed with since high school. So I was like, oh, okay, there's more than just gay comics. There's also this amazing drag scene that I've never like seen in American media. And there are hundreds of bars in Tokyo alone, with each with their own scene. And I just was reading more and more about it and wanted to make a film where we could get to know some of these interesting players in Japan's contemporary queer culture. So that's how Queer Japan came to be.
That sounds amazing.
Thanks.
And let's talk about Baisa. Where did Baisa come from, the concept?
it started off as a song that I had composed for my album Hala that came out a couple of years ago. And it's the album closer. And the entire album addresses the impending death of hypermasculinity in this world. So I wanted to end on a bittersweet note, which is this song that is about, you know, men who are on the DL and who have sexual relations with men and male presenting people. And I've certainly been on the receiving end of that, so to speak. But there's always a negative connotation to that type of relationship, regardless of how brief it can be. Mm-hmm. There's always this hiding, and then afterwards feelings of guilt that I've never felt because I've never been in that situation. But these men have, and you know, I've been with, you know, several men who are in this situation, and it's sad, but I know that it comes from the societal pressure to not give in to this kind of temptation to conform to a specific role that you have to embody. And this type of mentality is one of the contributing factors to our community, mm-hmm. like literally suffering like death and pain throughout history, because we are seen as a negative. We're seen as something shameful by a lot of people.
Something to hide.
Right. And there are many tragic stories, unfortunately, that are, you know, that should be told through film, through all mediums, you know, relating to our community. But I also know the importance of celebration during these dark times. So I wanted to take the idea of a DL encounter and transform it into a positive, which I know for me always, most of the time, it was a positive thing to, just, on the one hand, experience pleasure, like, sexual pleasure is something that, is, pleasurable, is what the term says. But I know, like, the takeaway for me most of the time was like, I would get what I needed, essentially. And I was hoping that I could give the guy I was with what he needed as well. Just, it was out of kindness. But I think there was just really this strong sense of positivity tied to all of it. And
for a moment, being true self.
Right, absolutely. And during the creation of the concept for Paisa, where it takes place in two worlds, essentially. One, the encounter in a motel room between two male presenting figures, and then a parallel universe in which, there are beings that are outside of just male presenting, but members of our queer community, who embody individuality. And I wanted to really just create this universe where it was almost like for 8 minutes, people can just get away from the darkness of how we're portrayed and bask in like just the beauty and the brilliance of who we are and the divinity of who we are, not just as a community, but individually. And that's what I wanted to really focus on is, sex positivity. This is, it is possible for sex to be a positive experience. Body positivity, like all bodies are beautiful, all of them. And queer brown sensuality, which is going beyond what two people engaged in any form of sexual contact should be as an ideal. But, anyone like within consent, is beautiful and is capable of experiencing and giving pleasure. So I wanted to tackle all of this into 8 minutes, but I did have a very specific vision to just really make this like fever dream type of experience using these two parallel worlds happening at the same time. And knowing how Graham has been throughout his career and, all these amazing projects, and certainly working with Queer Japan, which, by the way, I did see a almost final cut, and it's absolutely riveting. I mean, it's so beautiful, and it's so inspiring. It's such an inspiring experience. And I got to see it just as we had wrapped Paisa. So I knew that this was really the only person that I could work with, on Paisa, because there is a consideration for others that like aren't who we are. And that is, to me, like the best kind of people, the people who just go beyond like, what.
Well, who would honor it and be delicate with the.
Right. And I fully trusted Graham, like with every step of the way. Yeah.
Thank you, Dorian.
Yeah, no, but seriously, like just such a joy to work with, like, and everything that we've done before. And I feel like everything's been a growing experience. Mutually, us as collaborators, but like individually, like, I know I've grown, like, working in my own work, working with Graham, I've matured, and I wanted to create something so, for lack of a better term, so beautiful that, we could share with our community, share with the world, and have it exist in like this 8-minute poem. And Graham was, again, like just the perfect collaborator for this. So I'm incredibly honored, incredibly pleased with how it came out.
Beautiful.
Well, personally, for me, I'm grateful that we got to have this opportunity to collaborate in this way. Because, when you were talking about your past, it just made me think about the first times that I met you or came to your shows, even before we really got to know each other, probably in like 2006 or 2007. And I would see these like incredible theatrical productions that you would put on in the form of a concert with like operatic music, telling these incredible stories. And then I was like really impressed by your craft and art at that time. And then I remember seeing this other side of you when we were both at, I think, a Proposition 8 protest in 2008, and you were with Kill Sonic, which is this amazing like experimental noise collective in a way. I don't know if that's how you would describe it.
Sure,
but,
yeah.
but they were basically just making as much noise as possible, and Dorian's voice was rising above the crowd to just express this like raw emotion, and I was like blown away by that side of you. So I think that kind of like made me realize we had to do more things together. And I don't know, I've seen your artistic evolution over the albums that you've put out since I've known you, and yeah, it was a treat to get to make a film with you.
Paisa is a narrative film, correct? And how was it working on a narrative film as opposed to a documentary?
So I would describe it as like a surreal narrative. It has narrative elements, and there are elements of poetry, and that felt really freeing to be able to just sort of experiment with communicating visually in this way that wasn't so direct as in documentary, where I'm trying to capture reality and represent the people in the film in a way that feels true and honest. In this film, we were sort of playing with the creation of images and using symbols and sort of dreamlike imagery. So I was having a blast just trying to interpret Dorian's vision and also improvise, and we also allowed, I think, our cast to take it in different directions and insert themselves into the narrative. So.
Yeah. Was there a screenplay written for Paisa? Or was it more like a outline, like this is where...
It was more of an outline, and even that was...
very loose?
Well, this is... I know that how I tend to work can be in a very abstract way, and it can be frustrating for some, and I'm sure at one point it may have been frustrating for Graham here and there, but...
I was always down.
but see, I think that's the other thing. Like one of the reasons why I love working with Graham, I've always loved working with Graham, is that I feel like I do struggle with communicating certain ideas sometimes, and when people just are intuitive and, for lack of a better term, feel things, feel an intention, feel an idea, then to me that is a godsend, because I tend to get a little squirmish when, we have to narrow things down to like the second. We did that with a previous short film that we did called Corpulencia, which was directed by my friend Soundguy. And
yeah, lots of precision in that one.
Lots of precision in that one. That was all shot in one take. In reverse. So it was about hitting certain marks within the song that we were performing to, and trying to capture everything in one take. I had asked Sinan if he had ever done anything like this, and he said no. I'd asked Graham if he'd ever done like this, and he said no. But the fact that we were able to pull it together, the fact that Graham was just completely just willing to do it and giving incredibly valuable feedback throughout to make it like exactly what it turned out to be, which is like one of my favorite things that I've done so far. That to me just really sealed the deal as far as like, Bison, needs to be done with Graham, because Graham and I already speak this very similar language. Which is,
I think we have a shorthand.
Yeah, exactly. I always feel like there's, we just give each other a little like just communications and like, what do you think of this? Or I don't know, what do you think of that? And then it's very easy for me to be open to ideas that Graham presents, which is, is very, fruitful in any collaboration.
Right.
But we'll like make comments to each other sometimes that are just very honest and very upfront, like, and that to me is like very important, that there's, because that's,
there's transparency there.
There's transparency, and that to me that's indicative of a passion, like an actual love for what you're doing. Like you can be collaborating with someone and they could be coming from a stance of like, well, I just want to get this done already, whatever. Okay, fine. And I never once felt that with Graham. Like with Graham, it was just, we worked on it together. I felt like there was just a very even communication, and I'd come up with the concept, but the way we executed it, it was, it almost seems like I don't really remember even so many of the details, because it was just all so fluid.
Yeah, we kind of just felt it out as we went along.
Yeah.
And, sometimes that would be in the middle of filming, we would come up with new ideas, or in the edit, there were a lot of elements that we were trying to find a place for and arranged in a way that felt natural. So it was a very fluid collaboration.
Yeah.
Corpulencia, though, I would say was a little more tricky because I kept trying to convince Dorian, like, what if we just had a couple cuts? What if it wasn't one take?
And what did you end up doing on that film?
So I was director of photography and basically like shooting with a Steadicam this whole performance that was unfolding in a gallery space. And we had to time it exactly to a 4-minute song that was being played backwards. And all the action was going to be reversed. So it was very tricky just to get it to match up perfectly in one take. But we did it.
I think we
Can I
somehow
ask
did it.
how many takes it took, or is it a secret?
Oh, about like 8?
7 or 8.
7 or 8. Yeah,
Oh.
it was. But it was if something like fucked up at one point, like, we had to reset everything. And so that took a long time. And it was the very last take, of course, because that's how the magic happens. Yeah. It was like an fuck it, we're like, I'm going to give in to Graham's demands that we have 2 edits. I'm like, okay, like, well, let's just do one last take. If this take doesn't work, then okay, we'll do a couple of edits. And it worked. I still don't remember exactly how it happened, but it was the one that worked. And it was the last one because I worked with Sebastián Hernández, Brown Skin Hazel, who's this incredible artist whom I love and respect enormously, and incredible performance artist whom I've worked with several times as one of my dear friends. They had to go to work, so they're like, I can stick around for one more take. So it was the one that worked. It was the one where we just completely fucked everything up, and like set wise, and it was really just what people love: the fire, the sweat, the violence, the frustration. It was all present, and I was very grateful yet again to Graham for going along with it and being so patient, because I know that was testing all of our patience.
I'm sure it felt amazing when it worked.
Yeah, it was super cathartic.
Yeah, it really was.
We all celebrated.
That was really yet another reason why I wanted to work with Graham again for Baisa, knowing that Baisa was going to be far less stressful as far as that kind of precision, but also, again, to work with someone who is, as experienced and also as sensitive to the subject matter that we were going to be working with. And there were very vulnerable moments that I put myself into in front of the camera while we were shooting, especially the scenes in the motel room with Manuel Rodriguez, where we are simulating, sex, and I needed to feel comfortable. And, with Graham, it was so natural, and not once did I feel weirdly objectified or anything like that. Just all very respectful, all very considerate, and I was really, really comfortable throughout, and kind of a dream shoot in that we worked for several months on this 8-minute short film, but we worked around people's schedules, and certainly Graham's schedule, who at the time they were working on Queer Japan, and everyone else's schedules. On the one hand, it's like great to have this wonderful community in LA to work with. On the other hand, everyone's doing their own thing, so it's hard to get us all together in one fell swoop. So we had to really spread things out for 3 or 4 months as far as the shooting went, and then the editing took about an additional month and a half, and then we decided to submit it to festivals. And
talk about that process. How is it submitting your films once you're done into film festivals? Are there specific film festivals to look out for, or is it just certain ones that you like that you've been in before? Talk about submitting into film festivals.
I was doing most of the submitting for Queer Japan, and I kind of let Dorian do submissions for Paisas because I was just so busy with other things at that time. And
can't believe you made me work.
But they did a great job. We got into a bunch of festivals, so it worked out. And you applied to festivals I wouldn't have even thought of or didn't know about. Several Scandinavian festivals. Right. So that was cool. And Dorian got to go present the film at Queer Arts Stockholm?
Yeah, in Stockholm. Yeah, recently.
That's awesome.
But that was actually something I learned from you, Graham. I didn't know anything about submitting to a festival, and you sat me down for like 5 minutes. Graham was already like experienced in this field, like, as with so many aspects of filmmaking. You already had your spreadsheet with film festivals, the deadlines to submit, the price to submit to each festival. And I was like, oh my God, you're so organized. But it was
I
really
like my spreadsheets.
Yes, and I love a good spreadsheet, and you give really good spreadsheet.
Thanks.
But that was it is actually a very, very useful thing, and I adopted it for myself after seeing that Graham had done that. I opened up a profile on Film Freeway, and that's a really, really handy tool to submit to festivals. It's very easy once you create your profile and to just browse through festivals, and that's what I did for a good while. But then I realized that it takes getting into a specific type of festival that will sort of open doors to all these others. So when Paisa got admitted into Outfest Fusion back in March, that's when it screened it back in March. And
talk about Outfest Fusion, if you don't mind me interrupting.
So Outfest Fusion is the non-white Outfest.
I think the official title is Outfest Fusion, People of Color LGBTQ Film Festival. It's a lot of words.
That's so on the
close enough.
Exactly. And Graham had mentioned Outfest Fusion to me. I didn't know about it, and I was happy that we got in, and it was a very useful thing. That said, though, I do feel that on the one hand, it is important for the works of people of color to be, visible as much as possible, and certainly now more than ever. On the other hand, I feel that there is perhaps a more sensitive way to go about doing something like that, rather than creating like this, what is admittedly a smaller version of the big Outfest, and the smaller version is for people of color. So, as my husband calls,
it's like the kids' table almost.
Exactly.
It feels like the kids' table,
and it does. And I will. I'm a total whore. Like, I will take advantage of any platform that's put in front of me, because that's, visibility. That's the hand I've been dealt with, where it's like, we just need to be visible. I will take this opportunity to say that I feel like it's not very tactful to reserve this tiny little festival just for people of color, and then assume that we are somehow still more marginalized in what my husband calls white Outfest. And again, grateful to have gotten into Outfest because of visibility, because, it is helping us with exposure. I feel that it still allows me the right to be critical of the format that we're presenting our work in.
Right.
Because if we are not critical, then, nothing changes. Mm-hmm. So I do feel that Outfest Fusion, of course, did help us get into Outfest. And we had talked about the possibility of that being the case. So it did get into Outfest, and I feel like a big part of it was the exposure we got through Outfest Fusion, even though it is a smaller festival. Somehow, like, I started getting just requests from these festivals I hadn't even applied for because they had heard of Outfest Fusion.
Oh, that's amazing.
So that was really beneficial. And somehow most of them were in Scandinavia, which is great, because I did get to go to Stockholm to present Paisa, and probably the most crucial thing about what we're doing as queer filmmakers, for me anyway, it's that we are reaching people outside of our communities. And if we live in places like LA, for example, like, these are privileged communities compared to a lot of members of our worldwide community who don't have what we have. It's an opportunity to share and learn and listen and grow and strengthen our communities, because we don't know so much of, like, who is outside of our bubble. And to be able to go to Stockholm, and people of color might think, oh, but it's they're white, and I'm sure they have a colonizer background, and but we live in the U.S. Hello,
right.
But I was eager to go to Stockholm and experience the queer community there, and it is our queer community, and it was incredibly inspiring, and I was so honored to be able to be there to present my own work and to share it and get feedback and exchange hugs and many, many tears. And It was really beautiful. It was really, really emotional. But I feel this is what keeps us strong, if we know that there are other people out there who are vocalizing for us, who are presenting work, proudly and colorfully and unafraid. And that is certainly what I strive to do with my own work. I've seen that in Graham's work enormously, and certainly with Queer Japan, to give visibility to, these representatives of our community in Japan who each have something so important to say to the world, and not just, to give themselves strength, but to give us strength. And we need voices everywhere, and I just don't feel like we can get that enough.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's something that Queer Japan and Paisa have in common, is they basically both represent communities that we don't often see in the mainstream spotlight of LGBTQ representation or representation in general. And in both instances, I think the intent that we had behind it was kind of to celebrate and make space for people who aren't normally on screens, who aren't in festivals as much. And I think the film festival thing actually is exciting because it allows us to sort of cross-pollinate when we show it in different locations in different countries, and we get to expand people's minds each time. So it's nice that like all these other festival opportunities have arisen after we had our first screenings for Paisa at Fusion and for Queer Japan. Once they announced the Outfest schedule, I just started getting invitations from other queer film festivals in Washington, D.C., in Hong Kong, in Vancouver. So it's kind of like these
that's amazing.
Centralized festivals can really like
open the door.
Yeah, it's no joke that when you hear about like gatekeepers, because like there are gates that can be opened, and it wasn't the easiest process with Queer Japan. Like I submitted to a lot of festivals before getting into Outfest, and it felt like it was a harder sell when you haven't been in any festival yet to convince someone to take a chance on you. And Outfest has been pretty supportive of my career since I started doing shorts. I showed my first short at Outfest Fusion. It was a short documentary about Payasos LA, this group of Leathermen in Los Angeles. And
it's a great organization. They do a lot of charity work as well.
Yeah, they raise a lot of money for charitable causes, and they dress up as sexy clowns, and they're just amazing guys. And that was the first short that I really made. So I was excited when I got to show Queer Japan at Outfest, coming full circle.
Yeah, because this is a feature.
Yeah, this is my first feature. So
that's pretty amazing. So your first short now into your first feature.
Yeah, so I feel pretty like embedded within Outfest, and they have opened a lot of doors for me.
Tell us when the dates are for the screenings at Outfest. If people in LA want to go see it or buy tickets, what days and where could they go get tickets?
Well, Paisa is showing as part of the Platinum Shorts Showcase at Mocha on Saturday, July 20th at 6 p.m. Tickets are sold out, unfortunately, but they do have a standby line, and you never know.
If they're early.
I would get there early, just, be ready to bat your eyelashes. Yeah, if you can get there early, like that would be good. But there is a whole lot happening that weekend. So that's Saturday for Paisa, and then Sunday.
Oh, yeah, on Sunday the 21st. We're going to be showing Queer Japan at the TCL Chinese Theaters at 1:30 p.m. And there are still tickets available at the time of this taping, so check out outfest.org and see if you can snag one before the 21st.
And I definitely recommend that people do. If you're not able to get into Paisa, definitely get a ticket for Queer Japan. You definitely want to see it on the big screen. I did get to see it on a biggish screen in your living room, and it's so beautifully shot. To hear these interviews and see these just wonderful human beings express themselves on a large format, it's really glorious, and I really recommend it.
Thanks, Dorian. And before Outfest, I'm actually going to Tokyo tomorrow to go show Queer Japan at a festival called Rainbow Reel, where we're going to have our world premiere.
That's amazing.
Thanks.
Congrats.
I have to go pack.
In Tokyo. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I'm really happy it worked out that was our first screening, because we can invite our cast and crew and get to watch it with everyone who made this film possible.
It's going to be amazing.
Oh, yeah. That's going to be incredible.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. If you're in Tokyo, come check it out, or keep an eye out for other festival screenings in your area.
Is there anything you will be working on next, either music or film?
I'm working on a few projects. I'd love to work with Graham again. I know that Graham is, going to be showing me. This is, I feel like, the beginning of the Queer Japan adventure that needs to happen as far as getting it out to the world. So I know for myself, I do have a lot of touring that's coming up. I have a residency at an art and technology institute in Spain in September, and then I'm touring a Chavela Vargas tribute chamber ensemble performance for a couple months into November, including a special LA performance that I can't talk about just yet in November.
Don't miss that, though. When Dorian covers Chavela Vargas, it's amazing.
Oh, thank you.
And beautiful. So check out that show if you can.
Can't wait till it's announced.
Yeah, I'll definitely let the world know.
So I'm kind of just starting to think about next ideas, because I've been so occupied with getting the film out. And one little thing that I've been doing to sort of keep my filmmaking practice active is making a web series or a vlog on my Instagram called Stretching with Graham Kolbeins.
Oh, it's amazing. It's so great. It's so great.
It's basically these little 4-minute videos where I'm standing on a yoga mat and stretching while talking about political or personal crises and sort of trying to breathe through the anxiety of our current moment. So I'm going to try and do some more episodes of that and just see how far I can push it. And then, I'm kind of trying to move in a narrative direction. And I've been working on some screenwriting projects, and hopefully next year I'll be working on more stuff like that.
Well, I'm very excited to look forward to the next projects.
Thank you.
Is there any last minute advice you'd like to give our listeners if they're interested in getting into filmmaking? What advice you can bestow onto them?
Yeah, I was thinking about this as we were talking earlier, and I think collaboration is such an important part of filmmaking, and finding someone that you can trust to collaborate with, not just on one project, but maybe over long periods of time, is such a valuable thing. Someone who you relate to artistically and personally. So I'm really grateful that I found that in Dorian, and I recommend going out there and just getting to know other artists that you admire in your community and trying to find how you can work together to make things.
I agree with Graham. It's collaboration is key on so many levels. And if you have a specific vision, I always heed the advice of my friend Tumex, who said, find people who love you. And I interpreted that as, cherish your friends, cherish your friendships, and nurture them, and really, cherish the ones that believe in what you do and believe in your vision, and work with them and make it happen. It can be really tough sometimes, a little overwhelming to think, how am I going to do this? I'm like, if you have a phone, you can shoot anything. You can, and it may not be exactly what you have in mind, but it's something to work off of. And then the next thing will be bigger. And then the next thing after that. Like I said earlier on, I insist on being busy as a mode of survival on many levels. And to me, it's, as I survive, I leave a trail of things that didn't exist before. So
that's beautiful.
That's a very, it's a consolation, and not all of it is stuff that I'm proud of, but the ratio of stuff that I'm proud of is, it is more positive now, and it just takes time and it takes work. But the important thing is to actually work and actually do it, and you can make it happen. every story should be told, every vision should be realized, and just get out there and create.
Yeah, and if I can, I just want to tell one little more anecdote about making Paisa with Dorian. When we came to our last shoot date, we had planned to film Dorian performing the song that the film centers around and some more surreal footage with Dorian. And we felt like there was something missing. And then Dorian decided to put out a call on Instagram asking for all queer, people of color, Latinx people to come.
Trans people.
Yeah, trans and queer and non-binary folk to reach out if they wanted to be in this shoot. And we got responses from maybe 10 people. Mm-hmm. And at first I was a little like, oh, wow, what are we going to do with all these people? But once they showed up, it was like, wow, this is what we were missing. This is the beauty of the community that this film is sort of hinting at. And now they're right here in front of us. And it really brought the whole film together. So that was just another moment of like collaboration. Reach out to your community and it can really like take what you're doing to the next level.
Yep.
That's amazing. I just want to ask this question because I feel like it's a fun question. What are some of your favorite movies?
The ones that come to mind for me are Dorian's pointing at the poster for Elysium, which I haven't seen, but I'm sure it's great. I love Wong Kar-wai's films, Happy Together, Fallen Angels, In the Mood for Love. And also the German filmmaker Rainer Werner Fassbinder. My favorite of his works is Fox and His Friends and The Bitter Tears of Petra von Kant.
Very cool. Dorian?
Oh, that is a very overwhelming question to take on. Because I love all sorts of movies. I love all of them.
Sure.
No, I'm a big John Waters fan. I love Zhang Yimou. Like, to me, is like one, like, still, even after, you know, creating more mainstream fare, is still one of the most underrated creators of our time. Is incredible filmmaker, Zhang Yimou. Jane Campion. I love Fassbinder as well. One of my favorite movies of all time is Poltergeist. And
one of mine is Poltergeist 3.
Yes. And yeah, to me, there's so much. I just saw Midsummer.
Oh, what did you think?
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think Ari Aster is actually a very exciting voice today. I loved The Hereditary, and The Midsummer did not disappoint.
Right.
So there is something very exciting happening in the realm of filmmaking. And like,
we should make a horror film, I think.
Yes, I love horror. And
you guys gotta be excited. Please make a horror film.
That would be awesome.
absolutely. Because there's nothing more beautiful than to give people in these horrible times the escapism of even more horror.
Is there anything else you'd like to promote? Where could people find you, follow you for future projects as well?
I am on Instagram under the unimaginative name Graham Kolbeins. And that's the social media I use the most, I guess. But I'm also technically on Facebook.
And you just had a website launch.
Yeah, I just redid my portfolio because I'd had the same website up for like 10 years and just like tried to update it every now and then. But now I'm like, I gave it a fresh new look, so check it out.
Nice. Where will people find it?
GrahamKolbeins.com.
Awesome. Dorian?
And I'm all over social media Dorian Wood Music is when I am on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. I used to have a Tumblr, but then Tumblr decided to take the high road of fascism. And I used to post all my nudes on Tumblr because I do love to post nudes. And to me, all nudes are tasteful. So mine
So
were,
send them to.
yeah, actually, mine were like
Find them on Scruff.
Exactly. I think mine are more tasty instead of tasteful. But I've since gone to yet another fascist outlet, Twitter, to put up my nudes for now, but it is a way that I express myself creatively through the body that was given to me by God. And so I do put a lot of myself out there, and website is dorianwood.com. There's more nudes there. I do more than just pose nude, regardless of what people might think. But I am very fortunate to have that outlet as well, and to certainly embrace body positivity. And
yeah, I think it's important, like putting our bodies out there, especially as things become more and more virtual and we become like sinking into our phones. We have to remember like the reality of our bodies and the beauty of our bodies.
yeah,
And have contact.
Yeah. Touch.
yes, absolutely, because I mean, we don't have the technology now where you can reach out and touch my naked body through your phone.
Yes.
But I'm confident that that'll happen in a couple of years. And
Within the next decade.
Exactly, and hopefully I won't be feeling that on the receiving end. But
On that note, let me thank both of you for being here. Thank you so much, Graham. Thank you so much, Dorian. This was amazing.
Thanks,
glad
Danny.
Thank you,
It was a
Danny.
pleasure.
Make sure to follow us on Movie Menu Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or our website, moviemenupodcast.com. If you would like to be featured on our episode, feel free to contact us at moviemenupodcast@gmail.com. On that note, again, thank you. We will be back next week with our new episode of Movie Menu Podcast.